Welcome, welcome, welcome to Fit Faith and Purpose 360 Total Woman podcast. I'm your girl Deridre, aka DBanks, and I am excited to do this podcast. Well, I'm really excited to do all of them because I love doing podcasts and I love doing these videos. So, the name of this podcast today is Difficult Decisions in Difficult Circumstances. Difficult decisions in difficult circumstances. So I'm excited to share with you some tips when you got to make a difficult decision in a difficult circumstance. And I know this also well because I count January as a year of unexpected shift for me. Yeah, January was something else. It came in, like I'm sure for all of us, like a whirlwind, and it did some things very unexpectedly that may have shooken your stability, changed your perspective. It did something that caused you to have to make a shift. So in January, for me, I had to make a very unexpected decision in a difficult circumstance because of an unexpected shift, if that makes sense. Okay. So I got notes so that I can stay on track and that I'm not falling off track while doing this. I definitely want to welcome you guys. I'm so glad to have you. If you've not went over to join FFP 360 Sister Circle, please go over to do that. It's free to join. Again, it's a place where we rally together to love on each other, help each other grow in fitness, faith, and purpose. This is what this podcast is about, to always everything either fitness, faith, or purpose that we discuss on here. So I'm very excited to jump in on this topic, making difficult decisions in difficult circumstances. So when we're making decisions, it could be very overwhelming. And it can be overwhelming because of the emotional weight of the decision. It could be because of spiritual warfare, like the enemy is hitting you on every single side, and you feel like you don't know whether you're going up or down. You don't know if he's about to punch you on this side, punch you from this side. It's like very overwhelming for you to make a decision. The other thing is paralysis by analysis. You're overthinking it. We're overthinking it. We over wondering if this it's a whole bunch of ifs. What if this happened? What if that happened? But really, does the ifs ever really happen? But sometimes we think that way, right? um so one example of a story that I love so much, and I also believe that God has me on this path, and I call it like my Red Sea experience. So the children of Israel had to come to a Red Sea experience where they had Pharaoh behind them and they had the Red Sea in front of them. And they had to make a decision to trust God. Trust if God is going to be God and God be the God who delivered them out of Egypt, and be the God that's about to deliver them out of a circumstance that they had never been in before. And that's when we apply that to our own life. Sometimes we could be in a difficult decision where we got to make a decision to either go to the right or go to the left, or to go forward or stay put. And in those times, we got to learn to trust who God is in our lives, and trust that God will be the God who he says he is in all things and everything, that he will never leave us nor forsake us, that he will always have our back through and through, and he will love us no matter what. And then the reward of doing exceedingly abundantly above what we can ever ask or think. So let's get started. This is a 6-step framework. We may get through them, we may not. I'm all game for a part 2. So let's get started. So step 1, when you have to make a decision, you need to clarify and get really clear on what that decision is. Like I said about January, for me, it was a unexpected shift that really thrust me into having to make a difficult decision in difficult circumstances. And I will tell you, for me in January, I probably would not have made this decision if God would not have made the grounds unstable, if God wouldn't have made the situation uncomfortable. I probably would have still stayed in spite of. And that was in January. I was working at a job I had been at for over 2.5 years. And I knew 3 or 4 months ago I probably should have left. I had the feeling that it was time to shift, But because of loyalty, because you want to be there, be supportive, be there for your friends, you want to do the best you can possibly do, but almost to the detriment of your own self. And I knew mentally, emotionally, I knew even physical wise, it was causing way too much stress. And then it was taking me away from what I truly want to do in my life. And then I wasn't feeling like I was growing. I was just stuck at one position, and I wasn't going to be able to go any higher. So January, I was placed in a predicament where it was like, okay, girl, you gotta make a decision, because at the end of the day, it's about what's best for you. Because really, do people care about what's best for you or what's best for them at the end of the day? And so, without going into too many details, something happened for me to say midway through the year, I'm giving my 2-week notice. And even with giving my 2-week notice, I had no idea where I was going. I had no idea what my job would be. I had no idea what God was going to do, but I know that this wasn't it. That January was the month I was so emotional. I went through so many emotions. I think I cried more than I've ever cried. And I'm not talking about like those weeping tear cries. I'm talking like them gut wrenching cries, crying to the point where you get sick because you have cried so much. But with that came so much clarity into knowing that, listen, I have came to the end of my road here. And there is nothing else that can be done here. There's nothing else for me here. And I got to allow God to be God. But I first got to make the first move. And this was a very radical faith move that I'm very familiar with. If you read my first book, Open Your Mouth and Speak, Your Words Have Power, Manifesting a Life You Want. That book is really about crazy faith. And I have had to operate in crazy faith before, where I'm like, here I am, God. I'm at the Red Sea. What up? What are we about to do? What are we about to happen in this? Like, God, what am I going to do in this moment? But all I could do is to believe who you are and make things happen. Before I get deep into this, if you haven't already, please watch this video, like, subscribe, share, help your girl grow this channel on YouTube and on all the platforms for Apple Podcasts, iHeart, Audible. We everywhere. So help your girl grow. So anyway, so back to the story. I'm at my Red Sea experience, and now it's time for me to make a decision. So I put in my 2-week notice, not knowing if I had a job to fall back on, not knowing anything, but I knew that at this point I had came to the end of my roads, and this wasn't it. And you know how you complain all the time? Like, you complaining to your friends, you complain to your family about life and what's going through. And they like, listen, either you going to make a decision or you going to just put up with it. Like, pick one. You just can't keep complaining, but you ain't ready to make a decision. So I always say, you'll make a decision when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. You'll know when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired is you'll get up and you'll make a decision. And I had reached that point till I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so I made the decision. And that during that 2 week, I'm like, now, God, now I'm stepping out on faith. You shook the ground. I see you. I hear you. It's time to shift. What up? What are we about to do? So I'll say, be very careful when you're making decisions like that. You got to know, you feel God, sense God, and knowing that God got your back. And true enough, God had my back. Even after I completed my last day on the 31st, God had another position set up waiting for me. He just needed me to make the first move to walk away, for him to put me in a better situation. Does that make sense? So you got to define what the problem is and what it takes. Define what the problem is and then what is at stake. So I defined the problem is I knew there was no more growth potential where I was. I knew that this position was stressing me out to the point where it was affecting my health and my mental health. And I knew that what was at stake was my well-being. And I believe on my last podcast, you guys seen, I had Laura on there. And Laura is my homegirl. Like, Laura, I believe God brought her into my life to show me that there is more. that to show me that it's important to live a balanced life, and it's important to be free to live the life that you have. And I had to really take a step back and look at and evaluate, girl, your children are grown. You are an empty nester. Why are you acting like the decision you make will harm multiple people? The decision that you make right now, if it's God led, trust that God got you, and you ain't affecting anybody but yourself. It's just you. So when I came to that realization, I'm like, you know what? I'm tired of not living. And then after having a really deep conversation with one of my managers, I realized, I'm like, I was telling her the whole 2 weeks, the whole 2.5 years I've been here, have I ever took a full week off from work? Now I may had to take off time for certain different things, but like a vacation, no. Even when I had major surgeries twice during my stay at this job, I still worked regardless of having surgery. I still worked regardless. So when I started looking at all of those different things, I knew it was time for me to shift, and I had to do what was best for me and not what was best for other people. Because at the end of the day, I come home to me, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. And he is the only one that is wiping the tears, not everyone else who is looking from the outside in. Okay. So when you're having to make a difficult decision in difficult circumstances, you need to clarify the decision you need to make. Like, you need to look at it, weigh the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, what's at stake. You really need to get a pen and piece of paper and sit with yourself long enough to make that decision. Number 2, gather information. Yeah. So I just said that. Weigh in the pros and cons. You need to be able to seek out all your knowledge, like everything of what you need to do to make this decision. If you're needing to make a decision, like I had to make a decision to have back surgery, and I did not want to make that decision without having all of the information. So I went and gathered. What would be the pros? What would be the con? What would be the alternative? What would be the band-aid? What will I need to do? So that I was very much informed. So really, I do live my life like that a lot. I really I do my research and gather my information so that I'm making an informed decision. And I'm not just making a decision because I got nothing else better to do, or I'm just want to jump off and just jump into something without weighing. Listen, if you make this decision, this is a possibility. And if this is a possibility, you need to be okay with what that possibility is. Does that make sense? So I'm not going to stay on that one. Step 3, evaluate the impact. Consider how it will affect your future, your emotions, and alignment with your faith. Not only just with your faith, but with your values of where you're going in your life. How is making this decision going to put you in alignment? How is making this decision going to better your life? In what ways and how? Like, you really need to set with yourself and clarify the decision, gather the information, and then evaluate, what is this impact going to have? Like, I knew this decision, it only going to affect me. It's not going to affect anyone else around me. My children are grown. They're living their whole life. So it's not like I'm making a decision that could possibly harm my children's life. It only will affect me. Does that make sense? So I'm looking at it from a financial standpoint. I'm looking at it from an emotional standpoint of faith. Like, what is going to put me in the best position and set me up for the best success and an alignment of what God had for me? And I'm telling you, one bonus thing you really need to do when you're making a difficult decision in a difficult circumstance is you got to depend on God every step of the way. Like, you got to pray and seek God like never before. You have to put God first in your whole decision so that you're not making a misstep that can affect you in more ways than one. Like, you got to be trusting God no matter what. You can't be looking at somebody else's plan for your life, what somebody else think you should have going on. You have to look at, listen, God, I trust you. And I can't wait to do a part 2. And the part 2 is going to be, listen, trust ain't trust till you have to trust. And I'm going to invite my friend on for that, because that's one of his isms that he say, trust ain't trust till you have to trust. So I want to bring him on probably next week's podcast, so that we can talk about what that really means and how to walk that out. But I knew in this time, in this circumstances, that when I was making this decision, that I had to be totally dependent upon God and God's plan for my life, not man's plan. God's plan for my life, not man's plan. Because man has plans for your life that benefits themselves. And when I'm talking about man, I'm talking about man or female that works for them. But when you're doing a plan that God has for you, it works for the kingdom. It works for the bigger picture. It works for what God has for you and what God lays out. And it's going to have a bigger impact on multiple people in a good way versus just what works for one person and this works for me. You want God's plan, because God's plan is the plan and the gift that keeps on giving, keeps on expanding, and you can't never cap out. You hear what I'm saying? It's like you breaking multiple glass ceilings with God's plan. Okay. See, I already stepped into number 4. So the step 4 is pray and reflect. Take God and seek confirmation. Take it to God, and seek confirmation. So I'm already getting ahead of myself. So that's step 4, which I talk about prayer. Step 5, listen, it's time to make the decision. What are you waiting for? At this point, it's just time to make the decision. And when you make that decision, you got to stand 10 toes down with God, knowing that this is the best decision for you. Whatever that circumstance, whatever that situation is, whatever that decision that needs to be made, you got to stand 10 toes down and make that decision. Don't waver for it. Don't let nobody change your mind. Like I remember the last week, it was like the week, I call it hell week. It was like the week from hell. It was very uncomfortable, but I knew that I would not be manipulated. I knew that I would not be convinced to do anything other than stand 10 toes down on this decision to do what was best for me and my future, because I don't want to just make a decision based off of what's going to be impactful in my life for the next 2 or 3 months. I'm looking at the vision for the rest of my life. Like, God, what are we going to do together from here to the next 49, 50 years of my life? That's where I'm looking at. So the decision I'm making, I'm looking at the bigger picture, not just what is right now. Does that make sense? Okay, so number 6, the final one, is reflect and learn. When you make the decision, you stand 10 toes down and you walk that decision out, it's always good to take a step back and reflect and to look at, what did I learn? And what I learned about January for myself is, one, I have to be prepared for the unexpected. Like when that shift happened, not only do I need to be prepared, but I also need to remember who God is. And that even in the midst of a storm, he can calm the waves and he can calm my spirit. And I can trust and rest in his arm no matter what, and know that God got me. So really, that's January taught me a lot about myself and a lot about my relationship with God and how to go deeper in God and how to trust God more than trusting man, because man will unshake you. Man can change their mind on you. And again, I'm talking about male or female, can change their mind. But God, when God says, this is mine, I got you. You're my daughter. You're the apple of my eye. Listen, if you trust me, this ride will be the best ride you have ever had in your whole entire life. Do you understand what I'm saying? So reflect and look back at what God has taught you during this experience so that you can take it into the next level. Listen, I hope you have learned something from this podcast. I hope you have learned something, took some notes, go back, listen to it again, take some more notes, because listen, we're still in the first quarter of the new year. God is going to show up and do some radical things and blow our mind. I'm still trusting God that this week He gonna do something that I have never seen before. What the word says, eyes have not seen, ears have not heard the things that God has in store. And I know God is about to do some great things. But in the meantime, I'm making good use of my time. In the meantime, I'm writing more. I'm producing more things, these videos that I want to put out and the content. And I feel like this is what I feel so excited about. I feel like God has given me so much content and everything that has happened in these past days. From January up to now, I found and learned more about myself than I have learned in a long time. And everything that I cried about not having, God has given me in these past week and a half. You understand what I'm saying? Like I'm so pumped and excited about what God is going to do. Like this ain't over. And it ain't over for you. God is going to do something so amazing in your life. And I just want to encourage you that when you have to make this difficult decision in a difficult circumstances, you got to trust the God that will make a way out of no way. You got to trust the God that will be a lamp unto your feet. You got to trust the God that will comfort you in the midnight hour and calm your storm and be your peace. You got to trust all of that. So with that being said, I am your girl, Deirdre, aka DBanks. I love you. God loves you. Really, there's nothing you can do about it. Bye for now.